Hello and welcome to the Scouting Board Season 3. We're finally back looking at some future NFL prospects. Currently, we got about a week until the college football playoff starts. There's a lot of bowl games going on right now still. The player we're looking at today still hasn't played in his bowl game, but we have 5 years here of his collegiate career, and we're ready to look at him. And, this is the earliest I've done an evaluation for a player. This series usually comes out around a month or two before the draft after the college season is over. But for teams that aren't going to be playing in the college football playoffs, for those prospects, we're going to start looking at them right now to get some more episodes out than we usually do. We've gotten a lot of episodes out more every single season. We've only done 2, obviously. But 3 years of drafts we're now looking at, and we're going to start this one out with a position we have never looked at on this podcast, and that is tight end. And no, this is not Michael Mayer out of Notre Dame. Instead, this is what's widely regarded as the second best tight end in this class, Dalton Kincaid out of Utah. You might have seen this guy a while back at the start of the season when he played then 7th-ranked USC in October in that big Utah win where they won by 1 point, that big thriller. Kincaid had 16 receptions for 234 yards and 1 touchdown, his biggest game in his college career by far. Kincaid's very, very intriguing prospect. 6'4", 240, tight end, can go up and down the field. Pretty good. He's a 5th-year senior. Only played 3 years at Utah previous to that. He played at an FCS school at the University of San Diego. Not San Diego State, University of San Diego, so FCS level. And then ultimately went up to the FBS and played for the University of Utah, became their leading receiver for quarterback Cam Rising. So let's get into Kincaid's pros and cons. As you know, we're going to follow the same formula as we always have here at the scouting board. We're going to go through the pros and cons. I'm going to talk about a little bit of tape, talk about what I like about him. Then we're going to go to comparisons at the end. And that will be our little evaluation here of Dalton Kincaid. If you haven't heard of Kincaid, you haven't looked at his highlights, please go look at them after this evaluation. Just an outstanding prospect to look at. Really, really fun tape. Usually tight ends don't have the most intriguing tape ever, but Kincaid, I think, is an exception to that, and can really, really pop off the screen when you look at his tape. So let's go with some of the pros. Kincaid has consistent production against Pac-12 opponents for his 2 years that he was majorly playing. So let's go over to his statistics real quick yearly. In 2020 was his first year at Utah, his junior year transferring over to the FBS. He only caught 1 ball for 14 yards that year. So a really slow transition for Kincaid into the FBS level. But once he got past 2020, which was an odd year, obviously, with COVID and it really not being college football completely, shorter schedules and just conferences going all over the place. But nonetheless, he wasn't a contributor immediately when he went to Utah. Instead, in 2021, he really started to make a difference. 36 receptions for 510 yards, 14.2 per reception, and 8 touchdowns. Very, very good year for a tight end. I would say Kincaid, if he declared last year, would have gotten drafted. Obviously wouldn't be very high with just a single season of production, 36 receptions for 510 yards, pretty standard season, but a good season for a tight end nonetheless, especially in the Pac-12 for a program like Utah, coming in and, having his first real chance to play, just great production. And then in 2022, this past year, Kincaid really started to jump. 70 receptions, 890 yards, 8 touchdowns, 12.7 average, but obviously he had a 34 reception increase. So you're going to have more screen plays. You're going to have more of that type of just like check down plays. He became more of a safety blanket for Will Rising, which is what you want out of a tight end. So even when that reception total is going to drop down, or not the reception total, but the average yards per reception is only 2 yard drop, so it's not too much. But you can see with reception increases, and this goes for any position, it goes for running backs, this goes for wide receivers, and this goes for tight ends. You're going to see that come down a little bit because the people that are getting the most receptions on the teams are the ones that are going to be reliable in and out. So they're going to get check downs when the quarterback needs their like last read. They need something just to get the ball out. They're going to go to their safety blanket. Tight ends act as that as a lot in the NFL. You see that with big guys like Hunter Henry, Gronk when he was in the league, Kittle, guys like that, that just are always kind of there for their quarterback and will take these little 3 yard gainers just to kind of keep the drive going and not have a nothing play or have a negative play. Kincaid is the same way, even though he does stretch the field in numerous ways. So against Pac-12 opponents, Pac-12 is a good FBS conference. It's a Power 5 conference, but it's not the best conference ever. It's not an SEC conference with a bunch of good defenses no matter who you play, including Vanderbilt now, which is insane. Vandy can now be a good team in the SEC. They finally got around to it. They're not a Big 12 defense, although Big 12 more air raid type of stuff. Pac-12 is starting to lean towards that now with the Lincoln Riley coming over. They're going kind of more into the air raid. Obviously, they had a lot of that with Washington State in previous years and still going on now. But Pac-12, if we're going over conferences, probably the fourth or the third conference here, kind of, a little teeny bit behind the ACC, I'd say. The Big Ten probably second and SEC one. So you're having the fourth out of 5 Power 5 conferences, but you still have a lot of good talent coming on defense from the Pac-12. Washington's produced a lot of guys out there. Oregon always produces a lot of good guys. USC, always getting good secondary and pass rushers. So you still have some really good talent. And Kincaid produced against really, really good Pac-12 teams. The good Pac-12 teams he had really good games in. And a loss to Oregon on the 19th of November, 2017, Kincaid was the guy that moved the ball the most. He had 11 receptions for 99 yards. Really, really good game there. He had his best game against USC, as I already mentioned this past year. 16 receptions for 234 and 1 touchdown, which was just absurd for a tight end. Rison kept going to him constantly, and just a great game for him there. Against Southern Utah, which is an FCS school, so I don't really count this game too much. He had 7 receptions for 107 yards and 2 touchdowns. Good game there. I mean, you expect him to have a good game, but against Arizona State, he had 4 receptions for 66 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was a red zone monster there. If you want to look at Kincaid doing really good in coverage and tight coverage and getting over defenders like really good, exceptional tight ends do, that ASU game is a phenomenal example of how Kincaid controls his body and can get over defenders no matter where he is on the field. Even with those 4 receptions, I think that might be his most impressive game just in terms of body control. Against UCLA, another good team this year, he had 4 receptions for 67 yards. And then towards the back end, Colorado was a horrible team this year, but that was his last really, really good game, 5 receptions for 102. And then in the conference championship against USC, he had 4 receptions for 40 yards and a big win over USC. So really, really good games there. And then if we go into 2021, he had some more average games. Never crossed 100 yards, but was always kind of that consistent tight end. The good thing about 2022 is we saw what Dalton Kincaid can be at his peak, that he's not going to be an average tight end his whole career, which is fine, right? That's fine. We have tight ends in the NFL right now that have been on their teams for years and years and years. And, the most you're going to get out of them in a season is probably a 50-yard game. But they keep drives going and they block well, and, that's kind of their role. That's more of what Kincaid was in 2021. In 2022, he took that jump, and that's what made him an intriguing prospect. Because if you can have a tight end that, You don't expect the tight end, unless you're Travis Kelce or someone like that. You don't expect the tight end to be the guy who's going to be your leading wide receiver every single game, going to have 100 yards, going to have 80 yards every single game, like 7 receptions. We don't expect that out of tight ends. You expect a good maybe 3 receptions for like 40 yards on a really good day. And that keeps the offense going. You can run play action more, and it just makes the defense have to worry about more and more parts, because ideally in an NFL offense, you're going to want a wide receiver to be that number one guy. You can work with the tight ends as your number one person, but ultimately that's not their role. They have a ton on their plate. You want them to just be a consistent guy. Kincaid opened up that he can be kind of a number one receiver on some games now, because he had that 234-yard performance. He had a bunch of 100-yard games this past year in 2022, and that really just opened up the horizons for Kincaid. So that's what makes Kincaid so high up, such a high valued prospect currently. And his FCS playing really well in the FCS. We also obviously saw Dallas Goedert come out of South Dakota State, not even go to an FBS school, and he's been amazing for the Eagles during his career. Now coming out of Zach Ertz's shadow this past year, and playing really, really well. We've seen success just from straight FCS players. So when you can see someone playing really well in the FCS and then transfer to the FBS, have maybe a bump year in between, and then immediately thrive into a leading tight end for an FBS school, especially in the Power 5, that's just really impressive. And it's something that you really want to look for out of a prospect. Improving every single year, never really had a bad season that we can point out. So that's just, anything you can ask for out of a tight end. Kincaid also has great stamina. He doesn't really get tired out there. The 16 reception game is a great is a great example of that. Kincaid runs a lot of vertical routes. Rising likes the vertical routes up the middle, those seam routes up the middle, and he's running vertically a lot of the time. Something that you don't ask your tight end to do a ton. Most of the time, tight end is just going to do a bunch of crossers, and Kincaid does crossers really, really well in under routes and things like that. But Kincaid can get up the field, can get vertical, and that's something that you want out of a tight end. And for a guy that was healthy pretty much his whole career and really never missed a beat, was 16 reception game for a tight end is crazy. 234 yards, doesn't look tired, gives it his 100%. Just a great motor out of Kincaid. And obviously, red zone threat. If we look at the ASU game, which, as I said earlier, was my favorite game from Kincaid, the 2022 one. Kincaid has a crosser route on his first touchdown, I believe, that goes into the right corner of the end zone. There's a safety dropping down behind Kincaid, and there's a corner coming up that was on another route or was in zone coverage. Anyways, it's double coverage. They're both closing in at the same time. They both have their hands up. Kincaid adjusts to his left a little bit, high points the ball, pulls that in, and pulls it over 2 defenders that both could have easily had their hands on the ball. A bad, I wouldn't call it a bad throw by Rising, a dangerous throw by Rising. He put it in a great spot. He knows Kincaid where he can go up and get the ball. So that was just a dangerous throw, but Kincaid can go up and pull that in. He has very strong arms, knows where to position his body. And with a tight end, that's something that you need for a good tight end. You need a tight end to have good body control. And Kincaid is a tight end that, I haven't seen as good of body control from a tight end in a long, long time. Kincaid's one of the best that I've seen in a while. So I think that anybody that can get Kincaid in this draft will have someone that you can rely on to go up for jump balls, even at only 240 right now and 6'4". He's not like a 6'7", like huge tight end type of guy. He looks a little skinny on the screen. He's not skinny. He's 240. Like, he's a big tight end. He's an average tight end size. But for that size, having that body control, he's not anything huge. He plays like he's huge, though, when he's in those red zone positions. And that's when you want to have a tight end, and he has it all there. He breaks in and out of routes that are very quick, and he has great footwork for a tight end. He can run any route on the route tree. This is why I think Kincaid is very much. I think if you wanted to play Kincaid as a wide receiver, I think you could play him as a wide receiver. Like what they were saying about Kyle Pitts, and I think this is how the tight end position is evolving a little bit. They're turning into more wide receivers that can block, and that's what the tight end position is supposed to be. But a lot of these tight ends are bigger. You can't really line them up in the slot all the time. You can't match them up with corners because corners are just going to keep up with them the whole time. But Kincaid, with his stamina, with his body control, and with his ability to run pretty much any route on the route tree, has the ultimate position to play anywhere, really. He's kind of a hybrid that we've seen a lot in these past drafts coming out with guys like Kyle Pitts, and earlier with Vernon Davis. If you remember Vernon Davis, a great tight end that could. A lot of people wanted to move him to wide receiver because he was able to pretty much do anything on the field for a skill position. And we've seen, players come in and coaches using them in numerous ways. Players are almost becoming positionless in today's NFL, and Kincaid really fits that really well. He lines up a lot in the slot. Those seam routes. You're not gonna do a ton of those out of just the in tight down 3-point stance tight end position. You're gonna put them in the slot, and Kincaid lines up in the slot, and he does vertical routes from the slot very effectively, and he does crossers, does any route on the route tree that you want, outs, does them very well. So Kincaid very well versed in his routes, and I think for NFL playbooks, he's going to adapt to them very well because he can do a lot. He's a smart guy, and when you have a guy that can do anything on the field, you can use him in multiple ways. That someone that doesn't have any disadvantages on his route tree, he can change to a wide receiver if his blocking is not going to work out. He can play tight end if his blocking doesn't translate over to the NFL. When you have that versatility, he's going to be able to stay in the NFL for a while, I believe. He's not going to burn out. Kincaid's not going to be a burnout type player. He might be an average player if he can't translate fully, but he has so much in his tool belt that he's going to be effective kind of no matter how he ends up. And that's going to be a big part of why teams draft Kincaid. Kincaid also moves very light. He only has a 4.7 140, but that could be improved here at the combine. Obviously, this is the first time we've done this stuff before the combine too, as well. So, and pro days, but he does have a 40 time of 4.171 seconds average for a tight end. Not too fast, but on the field, he moves really light and he looks faster. Game time's different than just a 40 time. Players will look faster, they'll play faster. We've seen this thing with Kyle Hamilton last year, having a slow 40, but still moving faster on tape, moving faster in games, and he's worked out all right for the Ravens. So don't put a ton into 40 times. Most of the time, the eye test is what's going to get you, at least from my perspective and how I look at prospects, the eye test is usually what's going to work out. And if you can compare Kincaid's speed against NFL prospects, which Pac-12 has a lot of NFL prospects. That's why playing in a Power 5 and non-FCS is easier to evaluate prospects, because you can finally see them in action against guys that are going to get drafted, and that you can say, okay, well, he just broke tackle on this linebacker, first round linebacker. We know this guy's going to play in the NFL, and we think he's going to be good. Okay, Kincaid just pretty much torched him on a route or blew through him. He can go up against guys that are going to be in the NFL that are NFL speed, and you can kind of calculate that where you want that to be and how you think the player is going to play. And Kincaid, in comparison to his Pac-12 opponents, has moved really lightly, good on his feet, good footwork, runs well. and he can get up. There's a lot of plays out there where he's hurdling, great agility, and he can get over defenders. So his Kincaid's athletic abilities, it's not just his, obviously it plays into his route running and his catching and his statistics, but he's not just some lanky, like, run of the mill tight end. This is a guy that can hurdle like Saquon Barkley, but can run you over like George Kittle. He's you won't see it when you look at him, but when you look at the tape and how he plays, at least in college, he plays outstanding. His agility, his athletic abilities are off the charts, and that plays into his positionlessness that I think can make him valuable in the NFL no matter what. As I said earlier, he's a safety blanket for the quarterback. Checkdowns, crossers, anything short, Kincaid can do that. And if you have nowhere to go, it's a last-ditch play, and you need to put it up in the coverage, Kincaid most of the time is going to go up and get that ball, and he's going to make something out of it. If you put the ball in the vicinity of Kincaid, he's going to most likely catch it and make a big play. And that's something that you really, really want out of a tight end like Dalton Kincaid, or a tight end in the NFL. Kincaid brings that to the field. Kincaid, as I said, his route tree is perfect. There's really no flaws in it. Kincaid has film of him going up the middle effectively, going down the sideline effectively. All crossers work. And one of the, crossers and all that short stuff, as I said earlier, that's a must for a tight end. You have to have that. That's the least the tight end can do. And a tight end can get into the NFL and have a long career just from doing that. Just watch Mercedes Lewis, a good blocker. He gets a 5-yard out every once and again. And he's 40 right now. He's still playing for the Packers, right? You can make a whole career out of that. Now, if you want to be a really good tight end, a tight end that's going to have careers like Mark Andrews and can be that type of safety blanket while also becoming a skill threat for the defense, you're going to want to be able to run against corners, run against safeties that are going to move down into the box like a Kyle Duggar, something like that. You're going to want to have to be able to run against them, compete against them, and run routes that you're not going to normally run as a tight end. Some of those are lining up on the outside as a big wide receiver would, and running a vertical on the sideline. Now, Kincaid, I talked about how good he is in the slot, but even besides for the slot, the kid can line up on the outside, be the outside boundary wide receiver, and go up against the number one corner on the team, go vertical, and just run by him, even at a 4.71. And even if he can't run by him, just play pace by pace with him, and he has the size on a guy who's going to be 5'11", 6 foot, 6'1". He's going to go up and get those balls. So when you have all that, it's just perfect. And again, running vertical against corners and DBs. There's a good play against USC. Again, he had so many great plays against USC this year in the 2 games that he had. But there's one play where Kincaid runs directly up the sideline against USC and beats one of their top corners just straight up and runs by him, doesn't go up or anything, just runs by him completely. So again, when I was saying he moves lightly and he moves really, really fast for on field, that's not just crossers or breaking a guy on route with footwork. That's just going straight by pretty much the player. So I'm surprised Kincaid runs such a slow 40 for himself, because he can beat corners that are running 4.4s out there in college. So the on-field tape, and when Kincaid's on, he is on. You can totally tell that from the tape, and that's what makes Kincaid a really, really special prospect. And again, for the last pro, he can line up in the slot and he plays like a wide receiver. The positionlessness is completely there for Kincaid. It's really, really good, and you can see it just pretty much clearly. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with the cons in the end of the episode with the comparisons. And we're back with the cons for Dalton Kincaid. So, first off, the first con is that Kincaid is basically a super senior. Kincaid's 23. He's going to be 24 in October, so barely into his first year in the NFL. That can be concerning, but there is a lot of players that, in last year's draft and now this draft that are older because of the NCAA instituting extra years of eligibility due to the COVID year and more injury eligibility and such. So we're going to see a lot of these players coming into the draft. And, being older isn't necessarily a bad thing. It can mean a lot more experience. And I don't think 23, is really that bad of age. He's not 26 or anything. If Kincaid was 26, I'd certainly be looking at, maybe a sixth, fifth round selection somewhere in there. But 23, you're relatively in line with the competition you're already facing in college in terms of their age. So I'm not too concerned about that, but it is something that can hinder his ability to be a higher pick in this draft and could be a concern for maybe his development in kind of, playing over his competition in college. Another con is that he has only 2 years of D1 production. For a guy that, played in the FBS his whole entire career, that would be a good 4, and especially for him, 5 years of FBS production. But he only started to be a factor in his senior year, technically. In 2021, he had 36 receptions for 510. That was his senior year. And then his fifth year, senior year, he had his big season this past year, 70 receptions for 890 and 8 touchdowns. So that's only 2 years of FBS production, since in 2020 he was pretty much on the bench. I'm not really going to count that one reception. I'm not even going to acknowledge that in my, looking at Kincaid's overall production. So only having 2 years, a bit concerning, but that production did come against Pac-12 opponents for the University of Utah, successful seasons, and him being one of the top receivers both years. So we also have to put that into account. And at the University of San Diego, he had 24 receptions his freshman year for 374 and 11 touchdowns, a huge performer. And then in 2019 at University of San Diego, he had 44 receptions for 835, nearly totaling his 2022 receiving yards total with about 26 less receptions. He averaged 19 yards a reception at the University of San Diego. So at the University of San Diego, he's a huge vertical threat, big plays. His longest touchdown was 70 yards at the University of San Diego. So he torched FCS opponents. So you could clearly tell, especially with how Kincaid translated over to the FBS and played so well in the FBS, with that production being so good in the FCS, you can totally tell that he wasn't meant to be in the FCS and he was meant to be higher than that. And in the FBS, I think you can tell that he is an NFL prospect just by his statistics. That has been misled a little bit in the Pac-12 with guys coming out of UCLA like Devin Asiasi not panning out, and producers like that. But I think Kincaid is steps ahead of that, and at 2 schools has shown his production. But then again, only 2 years of D1 production and did come from an FCS school, so those are 2 red flags right there. Wasn't amazing in every game, doesn't have 100-yard games all the time. It was just constant improvement by him, which can be viewed as, you want a guy to progress. You don't want him to stay stagnant. But at his starting level, at the FBS level, might have not been the best ever. And, for being the leading wide receiver, had some on and off games. Against Florida, his first game this season, he only had 2 receptions for 29 yards. And had a few more games where he struggled in 2022. But again, it's a tight end. They're going to have these types of games where they don't really do a ton of stuff. Against Oregon State, Utah pretty much won without him. They had 42. They won 42-16 with Kincaid only getting 3 receptions for 17 yards, but also did have a touchdown. So still contributing in the red zone despite not really contributing to any drives down the field. But tight ends, you're not going to ask them to be the number 1 receiver. If you're asking a tight end to be the number 1 wide receiver, there's something wrong with your team. Unless, again, you're like the Chiefs where you have just a bunch of speedy weapons around, and then you have Travis Kelce, which basically plays like a wide receiver, obviously. So he's not going to be a full-on wide receiver for your team. You could play him like that, but you're not going to play him like that every single snap, most likely. So a little bit of a concern there. His blocking, again, there's two parts to being a tight end: receiving and blocking. You need both of them to be a tight end. This is why I say Kincaid maybe could, if he doesn't work out fully as a tight end, could easily translate over to a wide receiver and probably play pretty well out there and be able to keep a long NFL career. Because his blocking has been all right, but again, if you're going to have only all right blocking in college, now you're going up against 300-pound linemen that are NFL guys that were the top of your position, top of their position in college, that are now just kind of average, and you struggled against maybe some backups from college level. That's going to be a tough transition over for him. So he's going to have to work on his blocking. That's something that can be taught. He might need to beef up a little bit more. But if you get him under the right offensive line coach, get him on the right technique, you'll be able to teach him that. Again, he has great body control. Someone taught him how to have great body control. So you can tell that he can learn how to do things. He just needs to have the right motivation to do that. So I feel like he's going to be teachable in the NFL to be able to learn his proper footwork for blocking and just getting in a better position, because that's really what blocking comes down to. The size matters a little bit, but it's mostly your footwork and your technique with your hands. So I feel like get him under the right system. Kincaid can learn that. He might have a little bit of a bump year one, which is expected. Again, we saw that transition from the FCS to the FBS, that drop. He only had 1 year, that 2020 year in between. He only had one reception for 14 yards, and then he finally transitioned over. So I think Kincaid's going to be more of a project in his first year. I don't think he's going to be an immediate contributor, but eventually he'll kind of come out of the shell. And I think putting him on the back burner for the first year anyways, putting him behind like an average tight end veteran tight end that can teach him a little bit, especially on the blocking stuff, just kind of keeping him out of the lineup, not getting him too harmed in that first year, will be beneficial to him, because then he'll come out and he'll be ready to block. And, even you can just mostly use him in maybe the slot or some wide receiver positions that first year, get him involved in that type of offense, but kind of straying away from his weaknesses in his first year. I think that would be the best way to develop Dalton Kincaid's NFL career. So yeah, those are the cons. There's not a ton of cons, as I said. I mean, I really like Kincaid. I think there's a lot of pros here. I love his receiving stats. I love how he controls. I just, his athletic ability, I think, is what really is his best ability here, and I think that's what jumps off the page for me when looking at Dalton Kincaid. My comparisons for Kincaid right now is a little bit worse of a Kyle Pitts. He's not going to be that superstar tight end, I don't think. But I think he's going to be a good, consistent tight end that maybe 1 year leads tight ends in receiving, or a couple of years. I don't think he's going to be like Hall of Fame tight end, but I think he can be a really good tight end for a team for a very long time. I think he's going to have a long career. So I think he has that Kyle Pitts ability. He's that kind of Kyle Pitts type of guy where he's a wide receiver and a tight end at the same time and has that really good receiving ability. I feel like that's his ceiling, of being just that really good, consistent player, which is something that teams look for. And I feel like his floor isn't that low. I don't think, as I said, I think he's going to have a really long NFL career just being a consistent guy. I think his floor is someone like a Dalton Schultz, where he just has a few games where he explodes like a few times, like a few 100-yard games, maybe every here and there, and then consistently has a 3 reception 30-yard game or something like that in a Dallas style offense. Not the best blocker ever, but can really get it done as a safety blanket for the quarterback. Playing into that as well, a Dawson Knox. We just saw Dawson Knox get paid an absurd amount of money for what he does in the Bills offense. And I feel like Kincaid is parallel to a Dawson Knox, Dalton Schultz, those type of modern tight ends that are coming in and just kind of getting down in the dirt, doing their job, but also can be very good vertical route runners and can be the everyday tight end as well that you need for an NFL offense. So let's look at some tape just real quick here of Dalton Kincaid. I just got some highlights here to look at. First play is against Colorado before the end of the second half. This is another seam route. Kincaid just goes pretty much 40 yards up in the ground, repositions his head, turns around, and comes down with the ball over the safety. This is the ASU play I was talking about. Crosser on a play action, and then the corner's coming back really far for that ball, but that is double coverage, and Kincaid readjusts his body, as I said earlier in the episode, and just comes down with it, turning left in the right corner of the end zone. This one right here is against number 4 of USC. That's the vert route I was talking about. He comes up over him really well, really good control, gets his foot down, and just comes up over on an outside route against the corner, which I think is just absolutely absurd. Here on another play action, just a simple crosser. This shows off Kincaid's ability to run, breaks through tackles, and just a short crosser that really gets him going and is something that all tight ends need to do. He can cover the field. He can do comebacks here as he did against Southern Utah. Comebacks, just the whole entire route tree is really what Dalton Kincaid has and why I love Dalton Kincaid so much. So to finish off this episode, I'm going to give Dalton Kincaid a mid-second round grade, about a B+ for Dalton Kincaid. I think he's going to go somewhere in the mid-second round. That's where he should be. I could see him sneaking into the early 30s. I could also see him sneaking into the late first round, possibly, for a team that really needs a tight end out there and sees a lot in Kincaid, especially if Kincaid has a good combine, can get that 40 speed up, and has a good pro day and good meetings. I could totally see Kincaid going in the late first round, but nothing higher than that. He's the second ranked tight end on my board. I admire Head, but I think Kincaid's probably the best, one of the best vertical tight ends in this class. And I think it's going to be a very effective tight end in the NFL. So that's going to be it for the Scouting Board episode 7. I'm going to hope to pop out another one of these episodes somewhere in the next week. Follow, obviously, Second Take, just an update on that. That will be coming back very, very soon. We got a recording session on the 26th, so look for that. Follow us on Instagram at Second Take Show. You can follow us on Twitter at Second Take Show. You can follow me on Twitter at Billy_SR. Oh no, just Billy SRP. You can follow Alejandro at Alejandro_SRP. He does some really good tweets and stuff, and just really good sports analysis from him. You can also follow us on Medium. We're doing a lot of articles and writing stuff. That's what we've been doing when we haven't been doing the podcast as much. I know this is the first one in like a really long time, but we've been writing a lot. So you can check out all of our articles, really good in-depth stuff from me and Alejandro. Aiden doesn't do any of the writing stuff over there, but me and Alejandro do. We also have a few other contributors over there that don't do the podcast stuff. Second Take's really growing a lot. We have a lot of people on board right now. So check out our work over there. We usually write a couple articles a week, and you can check out some of those if you like the written stuff. That's medium.com, and you can search up Second Take. It will bring you right to our publication page. Thank you guys so much for your support. We'll be back with another Second Take episode in hopefully a week. Look out for more Scouting Board episodes, more Second Take episodes. We're starting to get this ball rolling again. So thank you guys so much for everything. Also, if you want a player for me to especially cover, go to the Billy SRP Twitter, tweet at me, go to the Instagram Second Take Show, and just leave a comment of any player you want. I usually put up polls. I'll bend to whatever you guys want me to record about, because I'm, I just like evaluating players. So just throw any player you want at me, and I'll probably get that episode out for you. So thank you guys so much for your support, and I will see you guys in the next one.